Reparations, Martin said we coming for our check. Reparations, say it loud, 1, 2, mic check. Cream, cash rules everything around me. Dream, my legacy, you can't stop me. Coming for our 40 acres, HI 40 in our paper.
Kicking the door, coming for our 40 acres and more. Our 6.4 trillion. This said no, we fought the Civil War.
We came from the poor. Start from the bottom, we still on the floor. We pray to the Lord.
Greetings. Assalamu alaikum. Alafia. Peace to my gods and earths. Free the land. Sakpase. Chihan Tamo. What's up, family? Welcome to another episode of Run TV. I'm your host, Malik Shabazz. But before I go any further, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that mash button. And don't forget to leave your questions and comments at the comment box. I also want to mention again that this space is dedicated to bringing honest and truthful information, specifically to our brown, black, brown, and indigenous communities, as well as all those who seek truth. I got a special guest here in the house, at the House of Spirits, Jumoke Ifetayo, and he's a member of, actually the Southeast Regional Rep of Cobra, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. He's also member, citizen of the Republic of New Africa, and the former president of the Republic of New Africa. So anyway, welcome, Brother Jumoke. Welcome.
Greetings.
How's everything going today?
Doing well.
Good. All right, we can just look at the camera. And, like I said, this is there's no script in this podcast. We talk off the top of the dome. We talk truth. And again, reminder to all these people out there who watch this: if you feel that we made an error in something we said, leave it in your comment box. And if we are incorrect, we will make that correction and go online and make that correction publicly, because we all make mistakes. So anyway, I just want to say a few words before I let Brother Jumoke talk. Me and Brother Jumoke, we met a couple of years back, and our vibrations pretty much were in tune like an opera, and we just started reasoning and building together. And I remember hearing one of his first talks I believe it was in Mississippi, and I was like, "Man, that brother got some knowledge, and giving me information." And so I said, "I want to know who this brother is." So so I got to meet him and everything. So again, for those who are not familiar with Cobra, it's a reparations movement, and he's going to elaborate a little bit more on that. So before we even go into Cobra, I just want to let the people out there know, who's Jumoke Ifetayo? Where were you born, and how did you come about this? How was your journey into this movement?
That's always an interesting question. Usually I say I came from my mother. You see my mother's legs. But I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. I spent most of my life in Atlanta, Georgia. One of the things I often look at my life as sort of like a dynamic merger between my mother and my father. My mother, who's now an ancestor, was very much into African culture and tradition, exposed us to Kwanzaa, exposed us to a lot of things. And my father would be more labeled a political activist. He's done work with so many people, from Jesse Jackson to David Dinkins to right here in the Florida area, Hazel Rogers and other elected officials. And so my mission has been to really fuse the two, looking at African culture and tradition, and how do we merge that with the social justice and freedom work and liberation work, nation building work that we need to do.
Okay. What attracted you first to? Did you first join Cobra before it became you knew about the Republic of New Africa?
Yeah, I joined in Cobra before I got active with the Republic of New Africa. What happened was, I was living in Atlanta, and I saw flyers for the national convention coming to Atlanta, and it said that that one way that you could support the convention was be a volunteer. So I signed up to be a volunteer, and I was in the room in a hotel folding papers or folding flyers or whatever, and then they invited me to a meeting. And I went to that meeting, and I was just very, very impressed with that meeting. I was impressed with the level of brilliance and intelligence in the room. I was impressed with the fact that the organization was based on dual leadership, male and female co-leadership. and really, like I said, just impressed with what was being discussed and the way it was being discussed. And for me, reparations addresses every issue affecting black people. You know, whether you see yourself as a Pan-Africanist, whether you see yourself as a black nationalist, whether you see yourself as assimilationist, or want to focus on staying in the United States, whatever issue whatever road that you would like to take, or whatever issue that you feel like affects black people, education, health, criminal justice, all of those things can be addressed through reparations. So for me, reparations was the umbrella, was the one way that we could focus on all of the different issues and all of the different roads to freedom and liberation.
So it basically encompassed every aspect of freedom.
Yeah, and specifically in Cobra, I should say, talks about that in all of those different options, because some other organizations, when I began getting involved with in Cobra, I began to see some other organizations were not as broad-based as in Cobra. Some organizations said, reparations is only payment in gold. Okay. Right, that's it. Well, some other people say reparations is only repatriation, right? And some people might say reparations is only us being sovereign citizens or whatever. So that's one of the things I liked about in Cobra, was that in Cobra was saying, whatever road that you believe in, come in, you can be a part of it in Cobra, be a part of this coalition. We're not narrowly defining it and saying reparations is this or only that.
What do you think reparations is important? It's important for black people to get reparations.
Wow.
Is there a moral or legal aspect to this?
Well, there's so many ways I think that why reparations is important, but for me, it's basically like if we know the history of African people, and when I say our story, first of all, we're talking about our greatness, building civilization and culture, and not only building civilization and culture, but taking it to what I say to the highest levels, okay. Right? So we know that history, mm-hmm. and then we learn about the history of how we were attacked and how our cultures were, how they went in and burned the libraries and killed the priests, the priestesses, the custodians of the knowledge, how they kidnapped us and brutalized us and brought us here to this country, and then dehumanized us and made us work for, to build the wealth of this country, clear the land, build industries, sugar, cotton, so many other things. And actually, enslaved Africans was really the biggest commodity. Oftentimes we talk about cotton and sugarcane and all of that, but the biggest wealth generator in this country was actually our flesh, our bodies, right? So, and then we could come all the way up to the present and talk about, police murder and discrimination, medical experimentation, all of those things. So to me, I feel like as an African person, we have a duty, an obligation to our ancestors to vindicate them for what happened. We have a duty to our own selves to change the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Right. And we have a duty to create a better world for our children, that they won't inherit the same types of systems of oppression that we live in now. So to me, like I said, reparations addresses all of that. It addresses the past, it addresses the present, and it addresses the future. And so to me, reparations is so important because it gives us a holistic way. One of the phrases I coined is that reparations gives us a holistic, comprehensive, and systematic way of addressing all the issues in our community. And so we have an obligation, like I said, to ourselves. To me, I think about it like this: like if my grandchildren look back and say, wow, this is what was going on, like we look back at maybe our parents' era and say, well, this is what was going on in the 60s, and maybe we might ask our parents, well, what did you do? And I can ask my dad, what did he do, because he was involved in the civil rights movement and all that, and my mom. But, when I think about my grandchildren or some young people asking me like, oh, this is what was going on, they were killing black people on the street and police was doing this and da-da, what did you do? What were you involved in doing to address these concerns? Oh, they were making people, there was issues about teaching black history in the school or whatever it is. These were some of the conditions that were going on when you were an adult. what did you do? How did you address it? And I can say that I addressed it through working in the reparations movement.
We had a conversation once before, and I want to bring that up because I thought it was profound, and it was something along the lines where when people talk about reparations like being only money, but there was someone who said that's not what they took from us. You recall that conversation?
I'm not sure, but
it was like. Let me see if I can remember. It's like it wasn't money that what they took from. There was something else that they took from us.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's. I don't know if to remember the exact conversation, but yeah, I remember. Somewhat. And what's important about that, right, is that again I talked about the cultures and things that we came from, and we talked about how those things were taken away from us: our language, our culture, our traditions, our ways. Education, our ways of socialization, our ways of dealing with problems in the community, like we use elders, councils, and things like that, and how we address justice in the community. All of those different things were taken from us, and we were basically remade into a different kind of human being. To be honest, and then the models that we began to implement in our lives was looking at European culture models. And so, one of the analogies that I often use when we talk about reparations is when people focus on, say, the money, I say one of the analogies I use is say, like, okay, let's say you have a car and you filled up the tank, and then someone steals your car, and then the police catch the person that stole your car, and then you say, well, I just want to be reimbursed for the gas I just put in the tank. Like, you don't want your car back? Like, really, you don't want your car back? You think you want... So your car, in that analogy, symbolizes all that was taken from us. So money is just one aspect of reparations. What was taken from us, what we lost, is our culture and our ways of being, our languages, like I said, our institutions, our ways of socializing, and all of that. That's what was taken from us.
What do you think has been the greatest challenge or challenges towards getting reparations in the struggle?
Well, the short answer, and I'm sure you would like this, is what Frances Cress Wilson would say, which would be white racism. Okay. Did I say that right? It's
yes,
the way that
racism, white supremacy.
Racism, white supremacy, make sure I get it right. That would be one of the short answers. But along with that, though, is that that's on one side of the fence. On the other side of the fence is we as African people for so long didn't believe in reparations. Let me qualify that. There's always been some organizations and some individuals who have pushed reparations from even before slavery ended all the way up through now. And many times we don't know about those movements and those struggles, those individuals. More and more people are hearing about them. People like Callie House, people like Queen Mother Moore, brother launched the movement. Oh gosh, the Black Manifesto, James Foreman, and so many others. People who have contributed to the stream of reparations. But for the most part, the masses of our people have not felt like it was really viable, that it was really possible. People would say, oh, that's never going to happen, and we can't make white people pay us reparations, or it'll never happen in my lifetime, and all of these different phrases is what I've heard. Just like you're wearing your Cobra shirt now, a lot of times when I would wear reparations t-shirts, that's what that's what the response would be, is that it would not happen, or they'll never pay us, or the government doesn't have enough money to pay us, or it won't happen in my lifetime, and those kind of responses. So, we have done a good job, we feel like, in this movement in getting people to see the reality of reparations and talk about reparations and bring it into manifestation. Right now, there's I don't even know how many, I don't say 50, 60, dozens of cities who are now engaging in conversations on reparations. There's maybe 10 or 12 states that are engaging in conversations on reparations, or maybe more than that, as well as the work that's happening at the federal level with H.R. 40. The first time it came out of commission, came out of committee this year. Then there's a Senate version. And so there's a much bigger momentum. And so now you hear about it. People talk about it on radio shows like this. People talk about it on college campuses. People are talking about it in various forums and various national meetings and gatherings. People are talking about it. And so people are really seeing that it's more possible and believing that it's more possible right now.
How much of an impact do you think our own people slow the train down towards reparations by having those thoughts? Oh, we ain't never gonna get it. Right. White people ain't gonna give us shit. Because I think that mentally that kind of sets us back a little bit.
Yeah,
just that negative. Just thinking that we're not gonna get it.
It does. I remember one time I was talking to some college students, and they were talking about us not getting reparations, and then I kind of called myself flipping the conversation and said, that's the reason why we're not going to get it. Right. Because you all don't believe that it's possible, because you don't believe, because, when we look at certain, and get into a little bit, spiritual principles and spiritual laws, it talks about, that you have to not only desire something, but you also have to see what it is that you desire clearly. The more clearly that you see it, if you say, I want a house, that's one thing. But if you say, I desire a house, a 4-bedroom house with so many acres of land, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, I want, whatever, I want to have a large porch, The more clearly you're able to see and visualize what you want, the quicker the universe can bring it into manifestation. So you're right. When people are negating reparations, then they are slowing down the process. And so we're working on changing that mentality, and we're having like I said, a lot of success with it.
So basically, if you can conceive it, you can believe it. Or the other way around, if you believe it, you can conceive it.
The phrase is, one phrase is, if you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. Okay. One of my spiritual teachers told me actually that if you can conceive it and believe it, you must achieve it.
Okay. Are there any precedents, legal precedents, set on reparations as far as other groups are concerned in American history that other groups have received reparations?
Sure. There's a long list of United States paying out reparations payments and in different forms, not just in financial, but we know, for example, in 1988, the Japanese citizens who were in internment camps and their descendants were acknowledged with an apology from the United States government. This is something that's not often talked about. The activists who went to jail and who fought against the internment camps would be their political prisoners, just like we have political prisoners now. They were given amnesty as a part of reparations, as well as they were given cash payments, as well as a fund was set up to teach Americans about what happened to the Japanese during this time. And so that's one example, the Japanese redress, but there's been other examples of Native Americans and what's called the Eskimos, Inuits, received, I think, like 1 billion acres of land back, as well as finances. And then there's been other payments, and even the United States. I was just recently reading this article that Sister Kichi Taifa wrote. Even the United States, we know about Germany paying reparations to the Jewish people before there was even a state of Israel, right? But the United States actually helped to was sat at the table to help to discuss what those payments would be like, and even at one point in the conversation, they were talking about Germany paying reparations to the United States. The United States said, no, that's okay, we good. But it was also interesting in reading the article that Nkichi wrote, that she talked about some of the other countries which I wasn't familiar with, like Italy, and I'm trying to remember some of the other countries, Hungary, I think some of the smaller European countries, who also made the pay reparations. The United States also sat in on those discussions and kind of suggested what those reparations payments would be like. So the principle of reparations has been supported by the United States in different ways, and actually done by the United States.
So this is it's actually based on international law.
Definitely, it's based on international law.
And so, okay, we know about, and I'm in total agreement about the racism. So basically, you think that's the core reason why white America doesn't want to pay reparations to African people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people make, I don't know what to say, excuses. How we could call
They want to sidestep the critical issue,
there's a rebuttal to reparations. Some people will argue that affirmative action and some other programs like that is and even the Mitch McConnell said that the President Barack Obama was a form of reparations, and we hear these kind of things like that. People talk about, some people talk about so-called progress of people and look at, people like Oprah and Tyler Perry and celebrities and say, reparations isn't needed now. And then, black people say, they got to where they got because of hard work. We don't need a handout from the government. It implies weakness. Some of these are some of the rebuttals. But
I recall there was a hearing. Mm-hmm. I recall one of the persons that was on that panel. That's the argument he made. We don't want no reparations. We don't need no handouts.
Right.
But I find that
that was African American.
Huh?
That was African American person.
Yes.
Someone of African descent. Yeah.
But what I find a little funny, you mentioned earlier, I kind of want to touch on a little bit, but you said that the Inuits, what people know as the Eskimos, that they were given like 1 million acres.
I think it was.
But is that reparations? Because that land was theirs to begin with.
Right, and it was taken from them, and so it was given back to them. Right. So
but is that considered reparations? When you steal something and you give it back?
Correct. Yeah. That would
with nothing on top, with no cherry on top.
Well, no, I said they got land and money.
Okay. So the cherry was the money.
Okay. We'll go.
I'm just thinking because how you gonna steal something from me, give it back to me, talking about you giving me reparations. It was mine to begin with. So you gotta throw a cherry on top to make that wrong, to correct that wrong. You can't just give me what you stole from me. I mean that's a start, no? But I think this.
Well, reparations, and maybe we should have started earlier on with this is based on the root word repair.
Right.
And sometimes,
and that's.
I'm not saying that you're doing it, but
right.
Sometimes people look at reparations from a stance of, I would say, a punitive stance. Like, you did something wrong to me, and now you got to make amends for the wrong.
And that's where I'm going.
As opposed to what is it that I need to be repaired.
Right.
If what you did to me is take land from me and you give me that back, then you have repaired me. Now, if you're talking about, so we got to be kind of careful and not look at reparations from, and again, that's another European concept, from a punitive standpoint. Right. Like, we're getting revenge back on white people. You all did this thing and it was so bad that you have to suffer as a result. I mean, there's how do they do it in law? I think there's there's something called punitive damages, right?
Right.
So there's all right, so you get made whole supposedly from what happened, and then they give you additional amount, what you call, I guess, the cherry on top, which is called punitive damages. But we're not necessarily looking at reparations from that perspective.
Well, I was actually trying to drive you on that road because that's the part that we talked about in that conversation we had, the repair part. Mm-hmm. Again, yes, we know that there was physical stuff, but like I said, the repair part. How does this reparation? What does it look like? This repairing, like the non-material aspect of reparations. Like I said, the repair part of who we are, like what they did to us.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things, whenever I do interviews, I talk about the 5 forms of reparations that comes from the United Nations. Again, we talked about this earlier, that reparations is based on international law. There were so many different, from what I understand, so many different reparations cases coming before the United Nations that they created a commission to more clearly define what reparations should look like. And so that commission came up with what they call 5 forms of reparations, or full repair reparations. And so this is something that I usually do not always bring in whenever I speak about reparations, so it's a good time to bring it in. So one of the forms of reparations is, and this one, Brother Cam told me we should start with this one. Sometimes I usually end with this one, but is non-repetition, guarantees of non-repetition. It says cessation in non-repetition, which means that the crime has to end. Meaning that, like I said, for example, we could talk about, say, the criminal justice system or criminal injustice system, right? And so if we look at what the 13th Amendment said, that slavery nor involuntary servitude except for as a punishment for a crime. So that means our brothers and sisters who are in jail are modern day slaves. And so we need to, so part of reparations would mean that would have to end.
Right.
I always say this not in Cobra position, but to me, reparations would look like all the brothers and sisters in jail being let out. Now, people, come back at me and say, oh, well, there's murderers and so, and people in jail and rapists and all of that. However, again, we can look at a couple things. One is that in Africa, we didn't have prisons. We didn't put people in prisons. So what we understand then is from African culture and tradition that, yeah, people may have what I call broke the trust in the community. Because even the idea of committing a crime is a European concept. Mm-hmm. I like to say, if they have broken the trust in the community, then we have ways of addressing that from our African traditions and African cultures, and what would be those ways. So the first form is cessation and non-repetition, meaning we have to design our reparations, and a lot of that would have to be public policy and things like that. We have to design our reparations in such a way that the crimes that are happening to us today, as we have this conversation, cannot happen anymore and can't happen in the future. So that's really profound. I always tell people you got to take a little minute and wrap your mind around that. So cessation and non-repetition. Restitution. So restitution is interesting. Restitution deals with a lot of what you were referring to. We were talking earlier around, restoring you to the position that you were in before the crime happened. Restitution looks at things like citizenship and nationality. That's where we bring in a conversation that we deserve either to have our own nation or to go back to the nations that we came from in Africa. Restitution would look at things like restoring culture, language, all of those things that were taken from us and restoring us back to the position before the crime happened. Again, restitution. So you have cessation, non-repetition, restitution, compensation. And compensation, I usually don't spend a lot of time on that because, again, that's what most people think about when they think about reparations is compensation. However, we do live in a society, unfortunately, that is ruled by capitalism. We do know that money can make a difference in different situations. So money is a tool. Money isn't the reparations in and of itself, but money can be used as a tool for the healing and repair that we need as an African people. We could pay we could pay people to, say, do research on African American family trees so people can find out about their family tree and get, say, DNA tested or whatever they want to do. That's a small example. But finances would be needed in order to implement, say, a program like that. And then we would have satisfaction. So satisfaction looks at restoring the dignity of a people. So now with satisfaction, we're talking about special days of commemoration. We're talking about museums. We're talking about education, curriculum, the narrative that's told about African people. And then the last one would be, what am I leaving out? Rehabilitation. Rehabilitation looks at the psychosocial trauma of a people. And so rehabilitation looks at, health, but also not just looking at health right now. And COBRA has been working with institutions to look at the research as it impacts us on something that's called transgenerational epigenetics. Basically, what that is saying is that now there's science and that has confirmed that if trauma happened to, say, your great grandfather witnessed a lynching, and he's traumatized by that lynching, that gets encoded into his DNA. That gets passed down to